Hello, and welcome to today's special webinar event on how hybrid work killed VPN. Today's webinar is sponsored by Axis Security and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator. So, this is a special event on a timely topic, and before we get to today's really great content, there are a few things you should know about this webinar. First, we want this to be a highly informative event for you, so we encourage any and all questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. So not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you're going to find that we are offering several resources. We have two great PDFs from Axis Security, one on using Axis as a VPN alternative, and another on Axis Security at a glance. There are also links to the Actual Tech Media Guerrilla Guide Book Club and the ATM Event Center. So I encourage you to download those handouts now, check out those links, and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we'll be awarding $300 as an Amazon gift card to one lucky attendee on the live event. So if you're watching this webinar on demand, I'm sorry the drawing has already occurred, but if you're on live and you're the winner, you can choose to donate the value of the gift card to one of our selected charities. Thanks to generous prize winners on previous Actual Tech Media events, thousands of dollars have been donated to charity. So thank you in advance if you make that choice today. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found at actualtechmedia.com. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. To help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get let's get to today's fantastic content. So I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Chris Heinz, Vice President of Product Marketing at Axis Security. Chris, welcome to the webcast.
Hey, Scott, thanks so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and get a chance to speak with the team.
Delighted to have you. Take it away.
So I think as we can, thank you so much. Excited to talk about one of the hottest subjects probably in the market at the moment. I think no one would have expected, first off, that the pandemic would be lasting now almost close to 2 years, and certainly that we wouldn't be back in the office in some format. Now, some of you maybe have continued to work in the office throughout, or spent a couple of days here and at home, a couple of days in the office as well. But one of the most common trends we're seeing is that hybrid work is starting to become more of a permanent stay within organizations. Right? So maybe this is something that your organization is looking at, maybe not. But one thing is for sure is that it's changed the way in which we are looking to connect not just remote employees, but users being your partners, your suppliers, your customers as well. We'll talk about some of the changes taking place in the market. I'm sure much of this will seem very kind of relevant to what you and your teams are driving within your organizations as well. A little bit about myself. Uh, I've been here about 2.5 months. Axis Security was founded in 2018, so it's a very young company, and we're looking to disrupt some of the markets that we see out there. I spent the last 4 years at a company called Zscaler, building out their zero trust strategy, focused on one of their products called ZPA, which is their main kind of zero trust initiative. So had the opportunity to work with hundreds of different customers on how to enable not just remote work, but start thinking about building a strategy for work going forward. So looking forward to sharing a little bit of that perspective with you. But before I talk further, I'd love to get some thoughts here in the audience. So a little bit of a poll question. Is your company adopting hybrid work? So you have four options there. No, we will primarily be in the office. No, it would be primarily remote. Or, yes, we're planning to adopt hybrid work. Yes, we have already adopted hybrid work going forward. So I'll give a couple seconds to do that, maybe another 20 seconds or so, and we can kind of go from there. But please, I encourage everyone to participate. It should be pretty easy if you just click a few buttons there. Seeing some interesting data. I'll give it about 10 more seconds and then we will kind of move from there. All righty, time is up. Let's look at some of these results. Okay, so this is really interesting to see. Obviously, the majority of people are going to be looking at some form of hybrid work going forward, about, what is that, 60% almost, versus the 40%, primarily, actually 20% primarily remote, 20% primarily office. Okay, so this is really interesting. The office world is going to shift quite a bit, although for about one out of every five of you, it seems like there will still be a reality where the office plays some kind of core role. Funny thing, this is actually pretty much in line with what we're seeing in the market today. So when we speak with customers and we work with some of the analysts in the space, we see almost 70% are adopting some kind of hybrid work model. So on this call is about 60%. The fascinating thing, if you think about kind of the office move, only about 10% want to move to a traditional office from a business perspective going forward. So you see this massive change, and it's not just change kind of our work-life balance, trying to find times to go for walks throughout the day versus sitting at your desk on, a million Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams calls, whatever it might be. So it's also about how are we looking to actually provide a better, higher productive user experience for your end users. So this notion of hybrid work and what that looks like. I'm sure this is a image that looks very familiar to many of you on this call. I think every customer we work with, whether it's a major city here in the Bay Area or those other companies out there who have talked a lot about hybrid work, like City of LA, British BBC has talked about it uh, quite extensively as well. It's every IT leader is trying to figure out a way to keep people productive. So you're trying to make remote work more of a permanent stay. The challenge is that it's very difficult to find access solutions that work seamlessly across both home and the office. Many of you probably have some kind of business ecosystem or supply chain. The challenge with trying to get access for your partners or maybe your auditors, your customers, maybe your inventory managers, your suppliers, you name it, is that it's often tied to a reliance on connecting to the corporate network. In many cases, through some kind of VPN technology that you need to manage. So this notion of kind of overprivileged access tends to um, kind of become very common within your environment. Maybe you're spending on VDI infrastructure, which could be kind of expensive as well when you think about how to go and do that. The reality is that as you look to kind of change your business, adopt cloud, maybe Microsoft 365 is one of the most common apps we see our customers have. Salesforce is another. So on the SaaS side, and then on public cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, maybe you have a multi-cloud strategy, as I'm sure many of you do. The reality at the end of the day is that all of these are running on networks that are not actually controlled by the organization anymore. So the big question we get asked is, does it make sense to continue to invest in network technology or network security? Now it depends. I'm not saying the network is going to go away, right? There's many of you probably have latency or massive applications or networks that you've developed over the years and saying, hey, I'm going to take out all my internal firewalls, take away my network, and we're going to be good. That's not going to be the case for most organizations. But there will be a shift in terms of proportion of data, and majority of that is actually going to be flowing over the internet through externally managed networks. And really, the internet is slowly becoming kind of the new corporate network over time. So what you need to look to do is not look at providing network connectivity and securing your network, but how do you secure access to the internet? This is where we start to see some of the challenges with technologies like VPN, which of course you can tell from the title of this presentation, we're going to be talking quite a bit about. Not only did work from home change kind of our work experience, but it also created a target or a bullseye on many of the remote access technologies that we've relied on in the last 30 years. VPN and VDI were two of the technologies that scaled up immensely when COVID first hit. Right, so I'm sure many of you, if you had a VPN already, you probably use something like a Pulse Secure or a Palo Alto Global Protect or Cisco AnyConnect, whatever it might be. The first notion was, okay, I'm either going to scale up my VPN capacity, right, because I need to look at that from an appliance perspective, or I looked for some kind of alternative. So some of you might have adopted some kind of zero trust alternative. We spoke with a lot of the SLED organizations, and a lot of times they actually spun up more VDI infrastructure, like on the Citrix side. But what happened during this massive increase of VPNs was that we saw this massive surge in the number of exploits that are actively targeting these VPNs. Because of that, obviously, focus on remote work. So if you looked at the CVE database today, which is an open database of threats. You can hear about them, read about each of these different profiles. What are they? How do you solve for them, etc. There's actually about 550 known CVEs that are actively going after VPN technologies today. That's about 10x more than even VDI technologies that exist out there. And the reason this is happening is because these VPNs act as essentially lighthouses to the corporate network. It's saying, hey, remote users, those who are the good folks, the employees or partners who I need to provide access, come find me. The challenge is that that lighthouse is also visible to threat actors as well. And what they'll do is look for uh, outdated VPN servers that maybe have some kind of outdated SSL or TLS certificate. They'll run a port scan on the internet, discover those, use those as an entry point to get into the corporate network. They take over the domain access. Once they're able to do that, they deploy their malware. Now, since network connectivity is the express purpose of a VPN, once the malware is actually on the network, they can run something called Nmap. Nmap basically maps out a topology. It's almost like a radar plume, right? And they can see the rest of what your network looks like within, especially that network segment. So you might say, hey, I have internal firewalls or I have my network segmentation piece caught on. But the reality is these Nmap solutions can actually discover the rest of your network. And what happens is these malware or ransomware, Ctna can be Cringe is another one I just heard about, which is going after critical infrastructure for manufacturing companies. It propagates laterally. Once they've discovered some kind of sensitive information, that's when they start to ransom off the information itself. And that's why we see this massive increase in ransomware threats that exist out there today, many of which came in through VPN technologies. So I'm sure some of you, or if you haven't, maybe take a look after the session, read some of the articles. You see a lot of these common kind of VPN vendors have some exploits that are going on against them. And this is actually what triggered the executive order last year as well, around the need to kind of up our ante on the security side of the business as well, especially during remote work. So VPNs kind of aren't the way from an exploit perspective, and from a security perspective, what is? Now, I don't know how big of fans y'all are about Gartner and Forrester, but this notion of ZTNA, which is called Zero Trust Network Access, is a new space that has been developed over the last couple of years. 2019 was when they were first kind of coined the term ZTNA. The notion is to decouple application access from network access. So you're using identity and policy to ensure that only specific authorized users have access to specific applications. And some of the core differences here between something like ZTNA and VPN or ZTNA and VDI even is that there's no semblance of network connectivity. So application access is based on really internet connector TLS tunnels that are brokered together. So there's no inbound connection to the network where people can get on, move laterally, etc. Since there's no need for network connectivity, there's also no need to expose the application or the infrastructure that the application runs on to the internet. So there's no inbound listening port like on a VPN server, for example. So to summarize, no network access means no need to exploit, which means a reduced attack surface overall. The third piece or tenet, if you want to think about ZTNA, is that for the last 20 to 30 years, if you're using network security, which many of us are and have in the past as well, is you're always defining network segments, source IP, destination IP, right? These are kind of layer three segmentation formats that you're putting in. You probably have ACLs. So managing simple things like change requests become very complex, very complicated. What these ZTNA technologies are doing is actually looking at this at the layer 7 level. So we're saying application segmentation, not just to the app server, which is what some ZTNA services do, to the actual individual application itself. So very different approach where you look at this granular control to a specific app versus network connectivity overall. And this is why these lead analysts are recommending to these customers and to their customers, look at this as a key foundational element when you take a look at your zero trust strategy. I get it. When you hear zero trust, it's the biggest buzzword ever. We're going to actually add a little bit more behind that and help clarify what zero trust is. And not only that, it's what's the actual journey you should be looking to moving forward. So if you look at just from an architectural perspective of VPN versus ZTNA service, on the left you find the remote access piece. Again, the reason why hybrid work has killed VPN is A, the security piece, but there's also the user experience perspective as well. We talked about hybrid work being a combination of in office and home, but when you're home, you're connecting. When you're home, you're connecting to your personal broadband or Wi-Fi, whatever it might be. And you're VPNing into the environment, right? So there's this notion of inherent trust, but you have to constantly kind of log in, timeouts take place, you have to continue to log in. It's not really the best experience overall. When you move into the office, what do? You turn off your VPN, and now you need to think about how do you get access to an application when you're in the office. So there's this notion of it's not as seamless as people want it to be. The ultimate goal is to have a single policy that follows the user no matter where they go. And that's what these ZTNA services are providing. So whether the user is at home working on their broadband on their personal device or on their work laptop, doesn't really matter. As they maybe shift or change networks from home, airport, office, there's no sense of kind of re-authenticating or re-logging in. The user experience is extremely seamless, and the policy just kind of follow the user wherever they go, even if they go back into the office itself. This continual notion of authorized policy-based access as well. What they'll do is actually integrate with your IDP provider, so like your Oktas or Azure AD, the ping identities of the world, even your device posture folks as well, so if using CrowdStrike or Carbon Black, Microsoft, etc. Like the notion here is, again, get people off the network, especially not just your employees, but your third parties who probably don't need access to your network itself. They just need access to maybe some web RDP, SSH, or some financial services apps for things like auditors as well. Right. So this isn't VPN 2.0. I know that's one of the questions we often get asked by customers. Is this just kind of like a better VPN? This is just a good start point for you. You'll quickly see why the story is much bigger than just your VPN itself, though. So some of the kind of core differences we talked about. So I'm not going to repeat these too often, but I think the combination, if I were to sum this up, would be the challenge with VPN today is the user experience perspective. You want user experience to be frictionless. You also need to be able to find better ways to secure access to critical information. And part of that is going to be figuring out ways to minimize your attack surface. So how do you reduce your exposure to the open internet? There's some cool attack surface analysis tools that are out there that you can use freely to determine actually like what is my attack surface? How many VPN servers do I have exposed? How many public cloud instances do I have exposed? It's good to kind of start out with some of those tools just from a visibility perspective, so you have a sense of kind of where you need to prioritize. The other piece is, since these are very appliance based and appliance driven, you have this constant kind of game of appliances that you need to play. Um, More traffic, more remote people, adding capabilities, adding capacities. The entire VPN gateway, because of it, is actually where a lot of the complexity comes in, right? Because it's not just your VPN concentrator, it's often the external firewall that's front ending it. It's oftentimes the DDoS technology that you need because you're listening for inbound calls. And in case of some kind of DDoS event, you need to be able to burst out horizontally. There's the internal firewall, the load balance. So that entire gateway is really because you're placing remote users onto the corporate network. When you remove that, there's less complexity from the management perspective as a result of that. And of course, less money that you need to spend on it. So these are, again, some of the core reasons why people are moving to ZTNA. The fact that I can access all private applications, whether they're running in public cloud or in the data center, regardless of the public cloud that exists. Many of the customers that we work with have some kind of multi-cloud strategy. So they're not going all in on AWS or all in on Azure. There's some kind of combination of both as well. The other piece is, in some cases, they don't even want to have some kind of endpoint on the actual device itself, right? There's some users that you want just full agentless access. Uh, ZTNA, some ZTNA companies do have the ability to offer both agentless and agent-based, which is very important to consider. The agentless piece, of course, from a frictionless perspective, not another agent on the device. Third parties tend to really appreciate this quite a bit. There will be some users where you do want the agent deployed because you want deeper visibility into device posture and some of the integrations with some of the other endpoint security technologies that I talked about, which will help you automatically adapt access based on changes in context due to that device posture. Since these are typically cloud delivered services, there's really no appliances for you to manage. It's essentially offloading it to the service provider, just like any other cloud service, Netflix, Airbnb, right? You're not dealing with all the different blockbuster videos and returning those to the return stores and a little slot used to put videos back in. It's all kind of available to you and managed by Netflix. Same thing with Airbnb. It's the same notion here that we're taking with these zero trust connectivity services as well. And that's where you're going to see a lot of the time savings and cost savings as a result of that. So as we kind of move through here, I wanted to ask another poll question. So I get a chance to hear from y'all one more time. How likely are you to replace your VPN within the next 12 months? You got four options here. Not likely, likely, we tried but failed, and we already have a ZTNA service. So I'll give this, let's give it like 20 seconds. And we'll start looking at what that looks like for a second. I'm seeing some of the early stats at the moment. This is really, really interesting, and this will definitely create some good conversation afterwards. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see where we're at. Oh, I think maybe we lost the poll results. uh, okay,
Yeah.
well, if
Hey,
someone can let me know,
Chris, it
hopefully,
looks
maybe
like
Scott, are you able to see them?
yeah, I'm able to see them. I could tell you what they are. I'm sorry I can't put them up on the screen, but it looks like so for the not likely, that was about 41%, but likely was 43%. And then another, actually, it's gone up to 44%. Another 10% already have the ZTNA service, and then 5% tried but failed.
Okay, awesome. So thank you for that. It's great context to have. I'm not surprised to hear the combination of not likely and some saying, we've tried. And a lot of the times what's happening is with some of these other ZTNA technologies, since they don't support, or some don't support things like VoIP or ICMP, which is more server initiated protocols, it's very difficult to replace the VPN. So maybe you tried and said, well, I still need to keep my VPN around because of VoIP or ICMP or some kind of inspection capability that you feel like you'd be missing. So it's really common, and we'll talk about some of the ways to kind of overcome those, and maybe even how you can look at a solution like Access to help you solve those. The other piece is, yeah, the ZTNA market is young. Right? We did some research with Enterprise Security Group (ESG). They found that over the next 18 months, there's going to be an 80% increase in zero trust initiatives and spend, and the biggest investment is actually going to be in ZTNA, followed by CASB and DLP. So we're starting to see this emergence of ZTNA being picked up. I think Scott talked about how about 10% of you have already adopted a ZTNA service today. I would expect that to increase over the next few years. I think Gartner puts it at about 60% by 2023. The important thing to realize is, because I don't want to over rotate on just a VPN piece, ironically, but it's about helping you understand the broader version behind this. When people talk about zero trust, my biggest frustration as a subject matter expert is that they're not positioning it in the broader value of like, how do you actually get there? Where do you start? It typically remains at this super fluffy marketing level where it's like, yeah, we need zero trust, but what the heck do we do? Do we look at third parties? Do we look at employees first? I have this identity technology. Is that enough? I have a device endpoint security company. Is that enough? So helping people understand what that looks like. And for us, it's a matter of mapping out the journey. So start with VPN because why? It's high impact. It's uh, extremely valuable, and it's super easy to do, right? When's the last time someone said they liked their VPN? Hybrid work provides a great opportunity for you to do that. So a lot of times we recommend start with your employees, replace your VPN, or start with a small group of users. Start understanding what are the applications that they want to access. Start defining policies over time, and then enhance those policies so you get to a true least privilege access model. The next piece there is to think through, okay, not just my employees, but what are my third parties? So phase two is around taking that same concept of zero trust, the same technology that you're using for your employees, and just applying it to your user groups that are partner facing. So securing third party access becomes extremely important. The simplification piece is where now you start to get into areas of I'm defining a consistent user experience between home and office, between every user type as well. This is a matter of not just providing access to data center based apps, but even my cloud applications that are running in AWS, Azure, GCP as well. What these ZTNA services will do, what just zero trust services will do as well, is provide visibility to what your actual users are actually accessing. This is very different from the network-centric piece where you can tell source IP accessed, this particular destination IP. This is specific user, what application, when, from what device. And in the case, what we'll show you later around what we're doing with access is we'll show you all the different events that an individual user went to. You know, John accessed SAP at this time. John did XYZ within SAP. John logged out of SAP at this time, for example. Now, I won't read through all the elements on the slide, but I want to show you like this is the broader vision of what we're helping people see, right? It's not just a user conversation, it's an infrastructure conversation. It's not just private apps, it's your internet, your externally managed applications as well. We start applying that same concept of zero trust to now the open internet and SaaS applications, your M365s, your Salesforce, your Dropbox, your Box, being able to sit in between a user and application and inspect that traffic, make sure nothing malicious is coming in and nothing important is leaving out. Right, the hybrid work model becomes extremely important here. And then at a certain point, you want to start expanding and say, hey, this is not just about users accessing applications. This is about server to server connections as well. Maybe you're using technologies like HackerOne that need to be able to, API or connect to Jira, for example. So looking at using these security technologies to broker connections in that way. If you're a manufacturing organization focused on critical infrastructure and these sites that you're managing have server to server connections that are required, or OT device to OT device connections. In some cases, cloud to cloud connections. If you have SAP running in cloud and SAP on data center, how do you connect those? And same case between AWS and Azure, or Azure and GCP, for example. This is kind of the foundation that you build with, but it quickly expands to this broader vision. The idea is to get to this idea of security services edge, where you're extending connectivity out towards the entity as close as possible. That entity could be a user. That entity could be, like I just said, an on-prem device talking to another on-prem device as well. Segmentation and micro-segmentation between a specific app and another application is another really important piece that you want to start considering down the line, right? So I know this feels like a lot, but I promise you, if you break it into these different chunks, these different phases, it becomes very clear. It aligns to your business story. So what you need to do is make sure you're investing in a platform that helps build you and works with you along that journey. So the idea is to make connectivity as super simple and easy as possible, and not just be limited to just your private apps. So what we're seeing here, what we're recommending, is what the customers and other companies out there in the industry are doing. Like Unilever calls this trusted connectivity as a service. So they have all their users and plantations that are managing, their raw materials that they use, are all connecting through their TCAS service, right? So trusted connectivity as a service. So they have this kind of security checkposts where all the traffic flows through and it goes out to the internet, it goes out to their data centers. It's a combination of employees and third parties. And the notion is this: all connections are mediated first. So you're not going to go directly to the application. There's no inherent trust, I guess is one way to say it. So you're terminating the connection. What you're doing is inspecting that traffic, making sure that you have control over where that traffic's going. This is very different from what you're doing on kind of like the network side of it. There's no concept of pass-through firewalls, right? So it's not like it's all proactive versus active side of it. The second piece is around authentication and authorization. So these companies, like Access included, when we integrate with your SAML-based IDP provider. So it doesn't matter as long as it's SAML 2.0, Okta, Azure AD, Ping, SailPoint, you name it. We use that as a determinant to say, okay, this user has access. Then what we do is we take the policies that you have set within access and we enforce that access. So we look at a few different things. We can look at the IDP, the location of the user, even from a geographic perspective. We can look at device posture and determine whether or not, based on that context, the user should get access to an application. As we continue to do this, since we remain in line throughout the whole session, there's a ton of visibility that we're able to bake back into it. So I talked about this before, the different individual events that a user looks at. It's not just what they access, but you can see what files were downloaded. You can see what protocols they were used. Again, this is visibility that is not possible with something like a VPN or VDI because it's only looking at the lower level network components of that. The last piece is, again, we talked about sitting in line, meaning that the applications are placed behind the exchange itself. Whether you call it security services edge, SASE, NIST framework, zero trust, it's all the same concept at the end of the day. Minimizing that attack surface by essentially making the applications, whether they're external or internally managed, invisible to the open internet is one of the best things you can do from a security perspective. From a user perspective, having hundreds, in our case, 350 different points of presence that serve as the onboard point to your platform becomes incredibly important because you're not connecting a user to a network. You're extending connectivity out towards where the closest location to where that user is, which is where you're going to get some of those benefits around user productivity and speed. So I won't spend a lot of time on this because I don't want to make this a sales pitch or anything like that. But when you start looking at the different technologies and options you have in the market, there are some core things you want to look at. The first thing is don't just go for a service that is focused just on ZTNA. You need to think about the broader picture, your private apps, your external apps, even the digital experience of your users. So when we were building this out, we made the conscious decision to begin with ZTNA as that foundation because of that journey slide I just showed you previously, starting with VPN takeout being the initial piece of like how you're going to go enable hybrid work going forward. Start with the private app, start with something that's tangible, that's low hanging fruit that you can take advantage of. You want to make sure that you're not just looking at this at an agent-based perspective because you will get pushback from your third parties saying, hey, I'm not going to let you deploy something on my device. We don't see BYOD too much. About 10% of users will be using some kind of BYOD, so it's not often a priority for customers. But it is something you want to consider because your employees will not want to place some kind of company endpoint device or agent, I'll say, onto their company device. When you have conversations with some of these vendors, the reason why I'm sure some of you tried but failed to get rid of your VPN was what I talked about before, having to make sure you can support things like VoIP and ICMP. So that's one of the big differentiators we looked at. We looked at kind of the market and where some of these pitfalls and shortcomings were. We tried to enhance based on that. So we support VoIP out of the box, ICMP, RDP, SSH, web, all these are commonly supported pieces that we look at. So from an all ports and protocols perspective, the other piece is we provide the inspection. I'll show you a little bit more about that later. This is not just about security, though. What you don't want to have is security in place that is actually damaging user experience and user productivity. So, since we sit in line, one of the big questions then customers asked of us was, can we help provide greater visibility into the user experience? So, looking at the hop by hop metrics between a specific user, maybe they're accessing on their home laptop or their laptop from home, accessing an application like Microsoft 365. What are all the different hops between their broadband, the ISP, maybe the access edge itself, uh, the local internet connection, right? The connector that's sitting in front of the application that's running in Microsoft's environment. Where exactly is that latency coming from? Being able to click in, determine it, proactively identify those, and quickly remediate IT support tickets when they come in is a core value of what these types of technologies can provide to you. So you have this combination of the experience that your users want with the security that you need. And lastly, the distribution is extremely important. You need to have as many points of presence as possible, not just 13 or 16 front doors that are virtual firewalls that are essentially extending IP address to the open internet and placing you to a corporate network. 350 in our case are the on-board points to your to the service where we're going to broker that one-to-one connection itself. So distribution is very important from a scale and from a speed perspective that you want to consider. In our perspective, policy is something we wanted to make really simple. We heard a lot from our customers saying that not only the kind of network segmentation policies of the past and kind of dealing with ACLs and challenges around that, but some of the other zero trust services out there are kind of what we call disparate services. So, they'll have a separate service for private apps than for their external managed apps, completely different service for the digital experience piece, etc. What we want to do is create a single pane of glass where you look at policy, you control policy across all of your different applications and users, and making it extremely simple for our users as well. So consider that when you think about policy as well. From a hybrid work perspective, user experience is going to be the biggest piece. Right? So VPNs, we already know people aren't super happy about from my experience perspective. I'm sure many of you, if you're using VPN already, feel the same way. So the way we approached that was we needed to provide visibility to the exact applications that a user already has based on the policy that you set. So they can just quickly use the tile system here and click into whatever application they can access versus having to think about, do I need VPN? Do I not? I'm in the office. What do I need to do to connect? It becomes very seamless. On the IT admin's perspective, it was about surfacing up the information and visibility that they need right away. And you'll see right, even from the small image here, we're looking at specific users, where they're accessing from, the specific applications they had, um, how many are logged in at any given time. We're even going to start surfacing up what are the errors or blocks that took place and why. I don't have any additional images here around the policies that we set up, but the goal was to make it extremely simple. So we created this notion of security profiles. So basically a logical tagging system that helps you set policies extremely easily based on user groups, applications that are very similar to each other as well. There's also going to be a lot of APIs that you'll be able to leverage as well from an automation piece. From the endpoint side of it, it's a matter of understanding like hybrid work today is, I've been, preaching this the whole time, so I know this is a little bit repetitive on that side, but the client list and client base is extremely important. The client base is going to give you better device posture, and that you're able to check things like is antivirus on the device, full disk encryption, all these kinds of things. The agentless piece will give you, of course, the more frictionless experience since there's nothing to actually deploy on the device. But you'll be able to get access to not just web-based apps, but SSH, RDP, Git databases as well. Great for the third-party access user case. And the last thing I'll talk about from that perspective is you think about visibility at a whole new level. If people are working from home, you need visibility into what exactly they're accessing. It's much easier to do that when they're actually on the corporate network, much harder to do that when they're working from home. So understanding what they access, what file types, you see here all the different kind of workflows that the user here, and times and actual activities and commands that they logged into here within the application can be seen. Uh, this is not possible with something like a VPN on the network security side. Right? So hybrid work, again, is a huge opportunity for every IT leader. It's really an opportunity for us to look at it and say, hey, we're going to drive a lot of the transformation. I get it. Not every company is going to go to security leader or network leader and say, transform our business, right? But we have the opportunity to define policy. We can define policy that has huge implications, not just on security, but also on networking and on delivering the best experience possible. And that policy is what's going to help you set and allow for things like remote access for your employees, secure access from your supply chain partners, and even on the cost saving side, when you think about modernizing that infrastructure, adopting more public cloud, adopting SaaS applications, and starting to kind of rev down on the appliance game and purchasing those as well. So hopefully this was informative for you. There's a lot of information out there. I know it's and there's a lot of confusion out there in terms of the market. We're trying to help simplify that for our customers here. Here are 3 pieces of content that we'll share with you. It's a great starting point. There's an article on using Access as an alternative to VPN. There's another at a glance doc, and there's a talk with the expert piece. And the last piece, which actually isn't here, is we actually just launched a VPN buyback program. So we will give up to 12 months free. When you replace your VPN and sign up for a 3-year contract, we'll actually buy back up to 12 months of your VPN and apply that as a credit for additional 12 months of service for access. All right. So thank you for your time. It's been an ultimate pleasure. If there's questions, I'm happy to answer those questions. And Scott, if not, then let me know. But any questions that come in?
Okay. Yeah, Chris, we've got quite a few. Great presentation, by the way. I know personally that section about the 550 plus known CVEs targeting VPNs and how ransomware actors and other attackers are using those. That was pretty eye-opening for me. Yeah, the first question here, how is it that Axis is the only full VPN replacement? Don't other ZTNA solutions also replace VPN?
That's a good question, right? And I actually come from a former employer that also has another ZTNA service. And the big challenge that they deal with versus kind of how we're able to apply that and solve for that is the fact that we support VoIP and ICMP. So there are some protocols that many other ZTNA services do not support. And because of that, the VPN and the ZTNA technology have to coexist because of the lack of support on those protocols. So we saw that as a opportunity in the market for us to build a better ZTNA than anyone else had. So that's how we can solve some of those pieces. We're actually solving all the different protocols and supporting all the protocols that a VPN would do, but with the enhanced security and user productivity perspectives that we talked about today. It's a good question.
Okay, great. We got an interesting question here from Harvey. He's saying, where do you generally see workload increase in ZTNA implementations? Since you're working truly in a least privileged access manner, is there more of a dependency on sysadmins or people managing policy and identity? And he's wondering if now there's more of a need to
Great
hire
question.
certain associates when most companies are trying to downsize IT staff by doing a lot more automation. What do you see?
Really good question. Yeah, so there's a couple things we see. First off, you want to have some kind of ability to discover applications. So one of the best and easiest pieces when you think about kind of how do you maximize personnel usage, right? Because you don't want to just say, hey, I got to create all brand new policies. It's going to be a ton of work on top of what I'm already doing now. All right, I only have 2 or 3 people on my team, and now you're saying I need to like set more policies. So I'll say this first. You will need to define new policies, absolutely. The APIs and logical tagging that we have will help you simplify that. But over time, the benefit here is that you're flattening your policy structure because you're looking at things at a username and host name perspective versus what the firewall is doing, our internal firewall is source IP, destination IP, which are very complex. You could have hundreds of lines of policies within just a firewall table itself. So simplifying the policy piece is one of the big benefits that we're providing here. And as a demo, we can show you some of the ways that we're simplifying that down. But understanding what our users actually accessing, using that as an ability to say, I'm going to prioritize these applications based on the activity level I'm already seeing, and starting to define policy from that perspective going forward. So happy to work with you on the simplification piece. It's a common topic that comes up a lot because you're trying to do more with less. And although IT budgets might be increasing 4% year over year, that's barely enough to keep up with inflation of the business.
Right, right. Great points. Hey, a
Hopefully that
couple of
answers the
quick,
question.
yeah, and Harvey, just let us know if you want to drill in further on that one. A couple of quick vertical questions. Warren is wondering if your product gets use in education institutions.
Yes, we're actually it's a great point. I don't know how much I can share about this, but I'll say this. We're working with a university in the Northeast, and we're actually help support their cyber program, and that we're actually work with them and gave them a grant to where they can actually allow their students to adopt these technologies and understand what those are from a training perspective, but also on the customer perspective too. We understand on the sled space, budgets are a little bit different and unique in that perspective. But one of the core values that we're providing here is that it's super seamless. And even on the agentless front, a lot of times if you have students who need access to information, not having to deploy a client is very important. This is a technology space that is vertical agnostic, though, right? We work with companies in the education space and the sled space in general. We just had a call with the CIO of a major city here in the Bay Area around the connected city and how we can look at supporting them from a connectivity piece as well. Everything down to like even manufacturing. Right, we work with companies like that are creating large farming equipment in their factories, and they're using the technology to secure access to inventory apps like SAP without having to set up Wi-Fi networks at every exchange. Right, just putting a SIM card in their Android RF scanner or mobile computer
Hmm.
and using access to secure access to those applications. So there's a lot of cool things we can do in the space. Obviously financial services, healthcare, all that good stuff.
Great. Yeah, and the other one, I guess I said vertical, but I don't mean that. Isha is asking, how does access security work for MSPs and MSSPs that need to monitor customer devices and networks as well as occasionally remote into those devices? Do you guys have a big channel presence, or are you more direct? What's your approach there?
Great question. Yeah, we absolutely have a channel presence there. We can connect with our channel team. We work with several regional partners as well as some global ones as well. We don't have any current MSSPs where the actual channel would deploy and manage the service and provide like first line support versus we'll provide second line. That's probably the next iteration
Hmm.
of where we go. But we do have a customer success team that works quite a bit. We actually just hired a new chief customer success officer, and we're doing a lot of work to help deploy and enable as well as train a lot of our customers as well.
Okay, great. Another question here. Do you have to start with VPN replacement?
Great question. Absolutely not. I think that becomes a low hanging fruit one. I would say another core use case is M&A. If you're a company that likes to, or even divestiture, if you're a company that likes to buy, or not likes to, but grows through M&A or acquisition or divestitures, one of the easiest shoe-ins for technology like this is using this for that actual integration perspective, because since there's no network access, there's no need to do things like network consolidation. There's no NATing or IP address overlaps you need to deal with. You simply deploy a connector. The connector is just a lightweight runtime that front ends the application. Right? That app connector can see multiple applications. It can run in cloud. It can run in the data center, and then you just define the policy. So the user, whether they're from company A or company B, are just going to connect to the right application based on the policy that you can set. So VPN is one part, M&A is another, VDI takeout is another component as well. If you're trying to get away from some of those expensive VDI infrastructure licenses, when you think about the way VDI works, is it's typically a /22 network that is relatively flat. So when you place a user onto some kind of VDI infrastructure, it's typically a shared pool of resources. You have to constantly poke
Mhm.
holes in the firewall to allow access to those apps. So the VDI, or the more secure means of VDI access, is another core use case that we tend to see.
Okay, great. Um, so Subin has a question. Does it provide reporting? I think that question maybe came in before
Great question. Yeah,
your last slide there, but I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
sure. We absolutely provide reporting in a few different areas, both on the user aspect as well as the application piece. So we'll show you details in terms of not just kind of what user accessed what at what time, what device, and all this good stuff like that. We can show you all the different inspection capabilities, which are the actual individual events that were taking place. We integrate with SIM providers, so you can take all these real-time analytics and automatically stream that to your Splunk or your Syslog, or if you're looking at Microsoft Sentinel on your SIM side as well. So there's a ton of reporting that we built into it. Also on the endpoint side of it as well. If you have the access agent deployed on the device, we'll be able to surface up some of those endpoint data points as well.
Okay, great. One question that came to mind for me as I was thinking about, hybrid work as you were talking is, a lot of times you'll hear the sort of the classic example, the hybrid worker, being in the coffee shop or whatever, and VPN is often suggested as a solution to that, just in terms of, having a secure connection like right there in the context of the
Mhm.
of the coffee shop. So, I don't know if that's more of an like a consumer VPN issue. But I'll combine that question with one that came in from Betty. So Betty's saying to secure and encrypt all network traffic, you'll also need a VPN router, and many of those come with VPN clients built in. Um, are there aspects there that you still need VPN, or are those types of issues
Good
addressed by
question.
other things in a ZTNA approach?
That's a good question. And so this is truly a full VPN replacement. So the way the connections work here, if you think about private applications, I guess to really simplify it down, there's two ways to forward traffic to, in our case, the access cloud. You have an agent that's running on a device that's forwarding traffic from, your iOS laptop, your Windows, your Mac, your smartphone, or Apple phone, or whatever, or you have your agentless aspect of that as well. In either case, what we're doing is creating an encrypted tunnel where we're hitting the cloud, is mediating that connection. The other half of that is there's an outbound TLS 1.3 connection from the application to the cloud itself. What we're doing is stitching together those two outbound connections in the location that makes the most sense over the internet. So there's no need for the network connectivity at all. And I know it's kind of like a bit of like a mental change where we're so used to like connect a user to a network to get access to an app. We're literally using the
Mhm.
internet to securely access over these kind of, we'll call them micro tunnels, if you will, that are stitched together to the specific application itself. Um, the thing I'll add there is, and what you want to do in terms of interviewing some of these ZTNA vendors is make sure that they can do things like inspection, make sure they can support VoIP and ICMP and some of these other protocols, because if they can't, you will end up in a world where you're still using VPN in addition to the zero trust network access technology as well. ZTNA is just a part of the system, right? We've also seen some customers initially using VPN to the data center and then data center out to the SaaS application, in which they'll set for that SaaS policy, like you have to be coming from the corporate network in order to access it. It's like, oh, that's really what you don't want to do. You want to go as direct to the cloud as well, or to the application, but you need to have some kind of security checkpost that sits in line, provides not just the security, but also the experience that you're looking for.
Great points. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Um, we have another question here
Of
from
course.
Farhad, and I'm going to ask this one. It may be related, but it may just be my technical limitations, which are low, that it's not related. But Farhad is asking, does ZTNA support split architecture? And by split, he means the same client wants to access private resources in corporate data centers as well as public resources on the internet.
Yep, understand the question. I think what he's getting at is this notion of split tunnel VPN. So in some cases, what will happen is you have a user who needs to access maybe the open internet or a SaaS app, but you'll need to do a split tunnel VPN to connect them over to the corporate data center. The beauty of what we've designed here is that the agent or agentless, either way, it's smart enough to determine what access or what application you're attempting to access will automatically forward them to that app. So there's no notion of split tunneling anymore. If it's an external application or i.e. a SaaS application or just the open web, we will automatically, through the policy that we define with you, send the traffic directly there. Versus if it's a private app or an internally managed server or private app, we will connect them directly to the application itself. So no split tunnel VPN is no longer needed. And I get it. That's kind of what we were doing in the traditional sense when the network connectivity was kind of the best practice.
Gotcha. Great. Um, you, Another question here. Who are Access customers that have used Access for VPN replacement? And maybe
Sure,
I'll add to that a little bit. What are some of
sure.
the benefits that customers have seen in real world implementations like that?
Yeah, so we work with tons of customers. The ones I can publicly share are HOA brands, which owns Hooters. There's Nvidia that we work with. There's namely there's Kayak that we work with as well. All of which have replaced. There's a pharmaceutical company called Alnylam, all of which have replaced their VPN with the ZTNA technology here. The benefits are across a few different areas. The user experience is by far one of the biggest ones for their end users. Like being able to just quickly get access to the application, not have to worry about disconnects on a network or having to think about where is my, what form do I need to access this application? It's just seamless from that angle. The third parties really tend to appreciate the agentless aspect that we built in. So there's no actual client to deploy or manage. The second piece is on the IT admin's user experience perspective. I think there was a question earlier around like simplification, right? You don't have a massive team. How do you define these policies? We're concerned about the workload there. Making it
Mm-hmm.
super simple, like impossibly simple to set policy to allow access to any of these apps, SaaS or private applications, is another one of the key benefits there. And the last thing I'll say is the visibility piece. Being able to actually show you what third parties are accessing, what your employees are accessing, and help you make smarter business decisions based on those.
Okay. Well, Chris, it looks like we've run through most of the questions here. Really appreciate all your time and your willingness to address all these questions live. We really value that. I know the audience really values that. Obviously, great resources in the handout section, but if somebody wants to get started with access security or find out more, any other tips?
Yeah, absolutely. Just check out our website, accesssecurity.com. You'll find a blue ribbon at the top of that, which is actually pointing you to a brand new limited time offer around VPN buyback. Like I talked about the first zero trust step or your journey and your step, or sorry, step in your journey is replacing a VPN. We want to make it really easy for people to adopt zero trust, and so we kind of put our money where our mouth is. We are offering a VPN buyback program, so if y'all are interested, check it out on the website. And if you would like to call, let me know. We also have a free trial on the website too, if you want to just kind of check it out and set up some time to get a free 14-day look at what the platform looks like. We are happy to do that as well. So thank you, Scott.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris, thanks for putting together a really informative presentation and again, for all these insights in the Q&A. Thanks a lot. And
Sure. Good
before we
luck,
wrap up,
everyone, as you look to enable hybrid work.
before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the $300 Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that $300 Amazon gift card is Shubham Chan from California. So Shubham, congratulations. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, again, I want to thank Chris for putting together this presentation, and thanks to Access Security for making this event possible. And last but not least, I'd like to thank everybody for attending and for all your great questions through the session. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.